All right guys, Paul Jansen here, back with another video for you. This one on the outer game of performance. In the last video, we talked about the inner game and the various kinds of visualization practices and mindset and the kinds of things that govern the interior of the process of getting comfortable getting on stage. And today we're going to be talking about some of the actions that you can take, some of the things that you can actually do to get ready to get on stage, get prepared, and feel confident as you step up there and perform in front of a group of people. So if you haven't already checked that video out, you can find it down below. And I'm going to review something we touched on in that video, which is, I think, always important to keep in mind anytime you're trying to look at a potential solution to the problem, is you want to have clarity around what the goal is, what it is you're actually aspiring towards. So for me, what I think are the most important things about being on stage and delivering a solid, memorable, in the best ways of the word memorable, performance is, first of all, a sense of presence. So I call this core presence. This is something that certainly for me in the beginning was taken offline well before I would even get up on stage. So being able to maintain a steady presence through the process of performance is objective number one. Goal number two is very closely related to presence, and that is confidence. So not only are we present, but we're also engaging in the way that we hold ourselves, in the way that we speak, in the way that we play, in the way that we sing, in a way that exudes confidence. And this isn't posturing. This is also not collapsing. It's something in between. It's something in the middle where we are confident, there's a buoyancy, but we're not trying to push it or impose it on anybody listening. And the third thing is enjoyment. And for me, this is the most important goal. This is really what it's all about at the end of the day. I would much rather see a performer who is enjoying themselves, who is comfortable and confident, who is present, and I'm able to connect with them as a performer, even if they're not technically proficient. I would rather see that show than somebody who really thinks they're hot shit and is just rip-roaring through these solos and doing all this amazing stuff. But there's not any real person like that I can really connect to and relate to. So, and I would not only want to see that performer, I want to be that performer. I don't want to be a performer who is just going through the motions or trying to show off or not comfortable and not having a good time, which is basically all of my performance experience up until really the last year. So enjoyment is the goal, in my opinion. All right, so we're going to start kind of from the outside and work our way in. The first of the three outer game components I'm going to bring to the table today is lifestyle. So this may seem somewhat unrelated to performance, but it is, in my opinion, one of the most important factors. So we're going to begin with sleep. If you're not getting good sleep, you're not going to be learning effectively when you're in the practice room. You're not going to be able to focus effectively, and you're not going to be able to feel grounded when you go up on stage. If you struggle with anxiety, anybody who's experienced anxiety knows if you're not well rested, the anxiety is just so much worse. Your ability to hold it together, to remember lyrics, to bring everything that you've been practicing into the performance space, it's not going to hold up. So sleep, rest, making sure that you're not burning the candle at both ends is a really important piece of this. The second piece of the lifestyle equation is substance use. Now, this isn't a moral judgment. This isn't about whether anything's right or wrong or whether or not partaking in alcohol or other substances is a good or a bad thing. This is just presenting the fact that when intake or consumption of these substances reaches a certain point, it affects our ability to be plugged in, to be present, to learn, to remember, to recall things. So it's really important that you be honest with yourself about whether or not substance intake is a factor. And if it is a factor, you need to experiment with where that threshold is and really be honest with yourself about what kind of effects it may be having and what kind of response you need to take as a result. For me personally, I'm embarking on a year of no alcohol. I started the first of the year, and I definitely notice a big difference, and this is one of the reasons I decided to do this. The morning after I drink alcohol, even if I have a drink or two, I feel noticeably fuzzy. I just am not able to get into the day and be really energized and plugged into the things that I'm doing. And the gains that I would have in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, in terms of the benefits the night before, weren't that great, you know? Just not really in the cards for me. So I decided just to throw it out entirely. Cannabis was something that was part of my life, just here and there. I was never a real heavy user, at least not in my adult years. But I noticed that cannabis use has a really profound impact on my recall. And memory recall, especially with lyrics, is probably the biggest Achilles heel that I have. It's one of the biggest sources of anxiety, is feeling like I'm going to forget lyrics. And there's good reason for that. It's because I oftentimes do forget lyrics. And that forgetfulness is definitely tied into cannabis consumption. So my consumption of cannabis now is next to zero. So just be honest with yourself and be conscious of the fact that this is a major factor. If you're feeling anxiety, if you are struggling with memory and recall, then consider experimenting with less intake and gaps in between intake and your performances. All right, the third piece of the lifestyle puzzle is physical activity, fitness. Again, this might seem a little bit removed from musical performance, but I am reminded of and inspired by the story of Josh Waitzkin. Almost forgot his name. He is the person behind the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. And his story is pretty remarkable in the world of chess and then later in life in the world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But one of the things that he talks about when he was at one of these performance psychology camps that he went to, where he's there alongside all kinds of other athletes, was the insight that physical fitness, in particular cardiovascular fitness, was something that he said was the source of the biggest gains that he had in terms of his mental game when playing chess. Because the mind and body are not two separate things. The mind is an embodied phenomenon. And if the body has a kind of physiological capacity to handle high stress environments, that same adaptation to handle and manage stress is going to translate to emotionally, mentally challenging environments. So he talks about doing sprints up and down stairs. You know, if he's waiting for the person to play their hand, he'll go to the bathroom and go do sprints up the stairs and then come back. I have worked in sprinting just to get that high intensity component into 2 days a week of my fitness routine. So Mondays and Fridays, I do 4 rounds of hill sprints. And it's not anything, you know, it's going to get me into the Olympics or anything like that. But it's part of a cardio routine, run a few times a week as well. Nothing crazy, couple 3 miles. But it's something that gives me a physiological baseline that I definitely notice a difference in terms of how it also grounds me emotionally, mentally when I'm facing a stressful situation like performance. And the last thing I will say about lifestyle comes from a guy named Finbar Horgan. If you're not familiar with Finbar, he runs a great YouTube channel and community called the Gig Academy. And he's got a free community as well as a paid community, and really does some great stuff. If you're just getting into gigging, he's been a fantastic resource for me and has a ton of experience. And what he has said, as somebody who himself does not drink, does not smoke, is that as a gigging musician, he's oftentimes called on to fill in for other musicians who get sick and can't make their gigs. So this was something that he spoke directly to in his experience, was that being healthy and not getting sick is actually good for business. So just another point of note to keep in mind. All right, so the second component of the outer game are what I like to call state exercises or state practices. So this is really getting at the heart of what I was talking about earlier when we were talking about the goal of all of this. Presence and confidence and enjoyment, they really don't have anything to do with how good you are. Now, we're going to be getting to preparation here very shortly, just a little spoiler alert. But all of these things that are really at the foundation of a good performance have a lot more to do with your state than they have to do with your ability level. I think this is something that's really important to keep in mind. As with most communication, the communication between a performer and the crowd is largely unconscious. It's largely a nonverbal kind of communication. People are sussing you out based on the feeling they get from you. Now, that feeling is informed by what you say, how you play, all of those kinds of things. But it is strongly influenced by how you carry yourself and just your overall internalized state. So you can actually directly work on this using various exercises. So the first set of exercises I'm sure you've heard of before. These are power poses. People have written books on this. You can find videos on this. There's a ton of really solid research on power pose practices in various settings like business environments and interviews and these kinds of things. But you're basically practicing being in a physical position, again back to this mind-body connection, in a physical pose and a physical posture where you feel confident, you feel assertive, you feel like you're stepping forward with authority. And that physical posture becomes internalized in your state, which is communicated not just to how you feel about yourself, but it's also communicated to the people who are watching you on stage. So if you're interested in learning more about what I do for power poses, I kind of developed my own thing. I use some light kettlebells, and I think personally, if you have watched the first video, which I recommend you do as a good complement to this video, the avatarification of yourself, it's kind of your self-image, this avatar that you create of yourself. When you do these kinds of things looking in the mirror, you have this kind of imprinting of seeing yourself in this upright, confident position. So let me know in the comments if you would like some insight into what I personally do. Be happy to share that. The second component of state practices has to do with breathing practices. So these are so crucial to accessing and influencing our psychology. So this is really the bridge between our physiology and our psychology, between what we have conscious control over and what is really kind of seated in our unconscious. So breathing, I really come to three main breathing practices when I think about breath work. The first is what I think is the most accessible, which is box breathing. Most of you have probably heard of box breathing. So this comes out of Navy SEALs training, and it's essentially a 4 count inhalation through the nose, a 4 count hold, and then a 4 count exhalation through the nose, and then a 4 count hold in the exhalation. So it's a box. Now, I have adapted this to having a longer exhalation. So I double the exhalation time. So 4 count inhalation, 4 count hold, and then an 8 count exhalation. And then a 4 count hold. And then a 4 count inhalation. And immediately you find yourself settling in, right? It's a very powerful practice. It's something you can do in the immediacy, and I think this is how the Navy SEALs use it. You use it in the immediacy of a stressful situation. That being said, the ones that I like the most, number 2, is a much less known breathing practice called the Buteyko method. You can Google it. There's a lot of great resources on YouTube. And Buteyko is based on the very counterintuitive idea that the most important piece of the puzzle when it comes to developing our resilience and deepening this kind of mind-body, psychology, physiology connection and stability, it's all about the carbon dioxide rather than the oxygen. And by training the cells in your body to be able to handle a high carbon dioxide environment, it's kind of like it's just like exercise, where you're stressing the muscle by lifting weights. The muscle actually breaks down because of that stress. And it's the stress that makes the cell, the muscle cell in this case, stronger. So in the same way, when you very gently starve a cell of oxygen, you are also not allowing for the flushing of the carbon dioxide. So when you feel the sensation of wanting to breathe, which they call air hunger, that sensation isn't triggered by a lack of oxygen. That sensation is triggered by an excess of carbon dioxide. So the Buteyko breathing technique is basically a carving out of 5, 10, 20 minutes where you slow the breathing rhythm to a rate of, it's 0.1 hertz if you're interested in that kind of thing. It's about 10-second cycles, so a 5-second inhale, 4 to 5-second inhale, and a 5 to 6-second exhale. And this is all done through the nose with mindfulness. And you slow the stream and make it quieter and softer until you start to experience a sensation of air hunger. And then you maintain that sensation of air hunger very gently. This isn't something where your face is turning blue. It's just you learn to get comfortable with the very subtle experience of discomfort that you have from wanting to breathe. And you maintain that again over the course of 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. There are guided practices on YouTube to help you stay in the game, as it were. The Buteyko method is actually very gentle and very approachable technique. It's very soothing, and you can feel the impact that it has on the parasympathetic nervous system, on the activation of this rest and digest component of the autonomic nervous system very, very quickly. I like Buteyko so much, it has actually replaced the box breathing as my go-to before a performance. We'll be talking more about that in the next video. And the third and final breathing technique I'm going to share with you is one that I do every morning when I get out of bed before I go for my run, and that is essentially a Wim Hof breathing technique. It is a series of 30 to 40 rapid deep inhalations followed by a complete exhalation and then a breath hold. And once you get to the end of that breath hold, you inhale fully and hold for about 10 seconds. and then exhale, come back to baseline, and rinse and repeat 2 times. So this is not something I recommend. This is just something that I do. You've got to do your own diligence. I know there are some people who've had some negative reactions to the Wim Hof breathing method. I don't actually even know if this is exactly how Wim Hof teaches it, but it is what I do. And I was persuaded by the study that was done in 2014 showing a rapid spike and dramatic spike in adrenaline production, and something like 300% increase in adrenaline, and has other anti-inflammatory effects and so forth. And I just feel really good when I do it. I feel like my whole rib cage and chest cavity and lung capacity is just activated. I feel woken up and ready to meet the day. It just become part of my program. Now, mind you, I don't do all of these breathing practices just for performance. This is something that I find to be a very holistic set of practices that are supportive of a lot of things that are important to me in life, including performance. But this one definitely is an important one for me in a general sense. I don't think it has as direct a tie-in as the other two that I've mentioned to performance, but it's something that I find is a really good way to transition out of the rest stage. We're talking about lifestyle and the importance of sleep, transitioning out of that sleepy stage into being active and ready to embrace my day, which includes getting after it in the practice room. And with all of these breath practices, one of the most powerful things about it, I believe, isn't really the physiological change that is induced. It's actually just the mindfulness piece of it. I really don't think it matters in some respect which breathing technique you use. If you do box breathing, if you do that breathing, if you hold for 4 counts, if you breathe out for 8 counts, whatever it is. The secret sauce, I think, of this is the fact that you're actually bringing your mind to your breath. The other thing that I think also makes this really not about the specifics of the breathing pattern is that whatever breathing pattern you choose, whatever breathing exercise you choose, you're interrupting the habitual breathing that's associated with your fear and anxiety state. So if you are like me and you tend to freeze, you tend to hold your breath, you find your breath becomes very shallow, this whole part of your chest really doesn't kind of move at all, that pattern is associated with the anxiety that is associated with performance. So when you bring a breath practice into the mix, you're really getting all 3 of these benefits. You're interrupting the pattern, which allows you to establish a new pattern. It allows you to establish a new way of feeling about approaching the circumstance. It brings your mind into awareness of your embodiment, of your breathing, of your state, which brings it out of whatever it's, the rat wheel that it's running on. And the third is the actual physiological change that takes place as a direct result of doing the practice. So I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to what practice you do. So the third component of state practice are stretching exercises, very gentle stretches that you can do, especially with the spine, that are really effective in getting you loosened up and relaxed and capable of drawing from a place when you're performing that is relaxed. So oftentimes we have all of these tensions in our body, and those tensions become just kind of steady state in how we hold ourselves. And then when we get on stage, we have all of this tension and we can't really express the music in the way that we want to. So the key here is to incorporate stretching practices before your actual practice at home. This isn't something you just do on the day of performance. This is something that you do before you practice, and even when you're taking breaks. Hopefully you're taking breaks during your practice sessions, just doing some very gentle stretches. A little book called The Art of Practicing. It's by Madeline Bruiser, and The very first section of this book is just kind of an introduction and overview. The second section, part 2, a 10-step approach. The very first chapter that she has is stretching. This is not by accident. All right, so I highly recommend you checking this out. I'm going to just read for you a handful of the things that I've underlined, just very briefly, to illustrate the importance of stretching. We typically approach our instrument in come-as-you-are fashion, carrying a load of physical tension and mental clutter. Many of my students begin every lesson with a few minutes of stretching. Stretching the back is particularly important. Loosening the spine frees up the spinal cord and its attaching sensory and motor nerves. To the extent that we don't move, we cut off our ability to perceive and to feel. Right? So finally, if you breathe fully while you stretch, the movement of the breath makes the space inside the body more fluid so that the organs can expand and move more freely. So she goes on, maybe I can do a video with a demonstration of some of the breathing, some of the stretching, some of the power poses, and all of the rest. That might be something that would be worthwhile. But in the meantime, do some yoga stretches, do some twists, do whatever you're accustomed to doing already, and incorporate it into your practice. Make it something that's part of the ritual of practicing. Before you go into the practice room, and as you take breaks, just lay down on the floor, do some twists, do some cat-cow, and you'll be a completely different person as you show up to your practice, and then ultimately as you show up to your performance. All right, so we've got lifestyle, zoomed out, big picture, things that we can do to shore things up and set ourselves up for success. We've talked about the state exercises and things that we can do to train and condition and stabilize and relax our state. And now we're getting more zoomed in to where the rubber really meets the road. This is the third component of the outer game of effortless performance, which is preparation. There's no getting around the importance of being prepared. And I know for me, one of the big wake-up calls in understanding, for example, what a professional concert musician, what prepared means to them in terms of what it is they actually know by memory in terms of what the notes are in each passage of what they're playing. It's like the bar is really high with respect to what professional musicians know in that world. And so just being able to go through the song in a non-stressful situation when you're at home, just sitting on the couch or whatever, you're not going to be able to hold it together in the ways that you're going to need to when you are under the pressures of a performance. So you have to learn, what does it mean to be prepared? And in a sense, you have to be over-prepared. You have to be so solid on your own, whether it's the lyrics, whether it's the rhythm and the feel and the tempo, whether it's the high range of a particular song, whatever the case may be. If you are not at 110% in the practice room, then chances are that's going to be a weak link in the chain in the performance hall. Now, this has to be balanced out with a self-acceptance, which is really one of the most important components to this, where you allow room for failure. You allow room for imperfection. You recognize, especially when you're just getting on stage, it's not going to be perfect. You are going to make mistakes. So you have to allow space for that. At the same time, recognizing that over time, as you are looking to advance your skill and make fewer mistakes when you get on stage, the key to this is preparation. Now, there are many, many things I could get into here around practice, around effective practice, around how to prepare, how to break things down, build them back up again. But I'm going to focus on two crucial strategies to make sure that you are as prepared as you possibly can be for your next performance. The first is song selection. You want to choose a song that is going to be within reach for you, especially if you're just getting started. You don't want to try to do the most challenging songs. Even if you can get through them on your own, you want to choose a song that in short time is something that's going to be well within your wheelhouse. Something that you know that you're going to be able to get up and play and be solid in front of an audience. So this is a very simple but a very crucial piece of advice regarding preparation. The second thing I'll say, which I think is one of the most important methods of preparing for a performance, is to do practice performances. To set up your phone and just go through the motions of talking to the camera. You can set up a microphone stand. It doesn't even matter if it's plugged into anything, just so you've got a prop, and record yourself. And then importantly, you don't just record yourself, you watch it back. You watch it back and you take notes. You can take notes on paper. You can open up a Word doc and put in all the lyrics of the song and then make comments on each of the lines of the song. You can have a spreadsheet where you are documenting where you're practicing and you have different songs in the spreadsheet. And in that song, as you're reviewing the recording of the song, you're including a note in the cell of the spreadsheet where you can go back when you're practicing then and work on those specific things. So the ins and outs of how to do the deliberate practice once you know the things to work on, that stuff you can figure out later. A lot of it is just common sense. If you can identify as a listener, as somebody, or as a viewer also, this applies to state, posture, comfortability, confidence, all of these kinds of things. If you can see from the outside looking in, general weaknesses, especially if there's a pattern to those weaknesses, and then spend time in the days and weeks leading up to the performance really leaning into those weak spots that you've identified. Pick 2 or 3 of the weakest links in the chain and just commit yourself every day when you go into the practice room to isolating those specific things and working on them, slowing them down, bringing the pitch down, isolating your singing from playing, doing all of these things to break it down and then build it back up again. This is a surefire way to get you feeling solid before your next performance. All right, so that does it for this video. Hope you found this useful. These are things that I found to be incredibly helpful. I hope you find them to be helpful too. It's really basic stuff, most of it, but advancing the needle even 10 or 20% here, 10 or 20% there, 10 or 20% here, those things do add up and accumulate and work synergistically together and can have a powerful impact on your ability to perform with confidence. All right, so definitely check out the inner game to effortless performance. I'll put the link down below. This is the inner method, which is a companion to the outer method. Also check out the quiz to see what your performance archetype is. This is a personality quiz that I put together that helps identify the specific challenges that you are facing as an individual with a very unique personality profile, and how you can start to personalize some of the things that I'm bringing to you here in this YouTube channel to really get specific about how you can overcome your own unique challenges. And if you liked these videos, in the next video, we're going to be talking about how to get very specific about this very topic of effortless performance as you're actually getting ready to get on stage. So what can you do in the day before, the day of, the hour of, the moments before getting on stage to ensure that you are present and confident and set up to enjoy giving an excellent, amazing, memorable performance. See you in the next video.